My name is Marcus Verbrugge. I'm the Central Canadian District Director of Mission. I'm so glad you're joining us for this webinar series. It's the first of a series of webinars where we'll talk about the role of a mission group within your organization, within your church, and how that group can be best applied. So the first thing we really want to ask ourselves when we come to that is, what is our existing understanding? Many places used to have a mission committee, or sometimes they still have a mission committee. They might call it something different. They might not have a mission committee, but you might be wanting to have some part to say, some part within a subset of the church, which is helping drive forward the mission purpose of the church. As we begin that process, we want to ask ourselves, well, what is a mission committee? What is the role of a mission committee? What does success look like? And you might have various different understandings of what those things are. But I want to pull us back as we begin this to look at, well, what is the point of the church as a whole? And the point of the church as a whole is to make disciples for Jesus Christ. To make disciples for God the Father through Jesus Christ. So the point then of any subsection of the church is to do likewise. And I would propose to you that the group that we're talking about, whether you call yourself a transformation group or a mission committee or whatever, is actually to come alongside that which the pastor is doing, that which the elders are doing, that which the whole church ministry leadership is doing, and help make mature disciples that are capable of making other mature disciples. Of course, someone will say, well, aren't we already making disciples? Isn't the whole church basically a group of disciples? And that brings up a very valid question. What is a disciple of Jesus Christ? John Piper said, and I want to read this to you, the standard definition of disciple is someone who adheres to the teachings of another. It is a follower or learner. It refers to someone who takes up the ways of someone else. Applied to Jesus, just as John Piper speaking, a disciple is someone who learns from him to live like him. Someone who, because of God's awakening grace, conforms his or her ways and words to the ways and words of Christ. Or, as you might say in the past, disciples of Jesus are themselves little Christs. That's the real meaning of the word Christian. And Piper then would define a disciple as someone who is a worshiper, a servant, and a witness. A worshiper, a servant, and a witness. But a worshiper, a servant, and a witness, those are all things that we do. And Christ is calling us to become disciples, not just human doings, but human beings who are disciples. In fact, the scriptures specifically say, John 1:12 says, "Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become," and this is the crux of the matter, "children of God." Children not born of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. That was a great blasphemy of Jesus, of course, is that he claimed to be a son of God and that he invited others to become sons of God. Even prostitutes, even tax collectors, even sinners, to become sons of God. And there is no higher identity than knowing that you are a son of the King, that whether you're a male or female, that you're a son, you're a daughter of the King, that you have that identity as a child of God Most High. Just as Galatians says, you are all sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus. For all of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. If you belong to Christ, then you are of Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. So we've been made equal in significance, that God would love us as he loves Jesus. And that's a really important point. If we value senior pastors, if we value more than youth pastors, if we value missionaries more than mere disciples, that's actually not correct. We all have that core identity as sons and daughters of the King. As Stephen Harbridge is fond of saying, the role that we play is our functional identity, not a statement of our value. The challenge then that we have as a subset of the church is to invite others into the full realization of what that is. Because when they are that, they will do as Christ did. Therefore, I submit to you that the role of your committee or the role of your transformation group, whatever you call yourselves, should not be one merely of planning policy or of event planning, but to come alongside the pastoral staff, come alongside everyone else to realize the full measure of to invite others into realizing the full measure of what it means to be a true disciple of God, into maturity as sons of God. And therefore, what that subset does, what that committee does, what that transformation group does, is it should all be designed to inspire, educate, and challenge people toward the higher aspects of discipleship, the higher aspects of maturity as a disciple of Christ in our own culture and and across cultural barriers. That starts then with sharing our faith, even within our own culture. That's why Romans tells us, what Paul, writing in the book of Romans, tells us, that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with the heart that you believe and are justified. It is with your mouth that you confess and are saved. Now that ought to have an impact to us, because what it tells us is that if you haven't communicated your faith, one can actually question, is it even a saving faith? Therefore, we've got to communicate our faith within our own culture as well as within the cultures around us, the cultures that we get sent to and the cultures that God sends to us. That encouraging people in those higher aspects, the aspects of the discipleship aspects, straightforward discipleship aspects of evangelism and mission, that is the role of this subset of the church. These things should never be regulated to the realm of the professional. And yet in our culture, that's largely what's happened. We've regulated evangelism to the role of the pastor. As Don Richardson is so fond of saying, we are blessed to be a blessing, not only in the heavenlies with all spiritual riches in Christ, but right here with the peace of God, the presence of God, and the power of God. And we're not blessed with these things that we might hoard them onto ourselves, but that we might bring them to the communities around us, that we might make disciples of the communities around us, both those that God sends to us, those that God sends us to, and most especially those that God has already sent us to. I cannot really overemphasize this. If we do not start with evangelistic impact in our own community, then we will be increasingly seen as the radical few who are only concerned with those who are far away and those far away places. We must bridge the us versus them mentality that is so endemic in Western Christianity and in our churches today. It is that us versus them mentality that causes so many in the church to think that we do church here and they do mission there, and our role as a church is simply to support them in what they are doing. Many therefore excuse themselves from any kind of mission involvement and regulate that, and even see praying for missionaries as some sort of a special activity that's reserved for special times. But all a missionary is someone who grasps what God is calling them to become, and so does what God is doing. That's all a missionary is. And I submit to you that then is the role of a mission committee or a transformation group, whatever you want to call yourselves, is to inspire, to educate, and to challenge others to become what God is calling them to become and participate in what Christ himself is doing, both here and there. That is the big, hairy, audacious goal of any committee that you might be part of. In the next video segment, we're going to talk about best practices for that committee. How do we go about making mature disciples who are capable of making other mature disciples? How do we go about coming alongside our pastoral staff and elders and ministry leaders in helping make mature disciples for Christ, engaged in evangelism, engaged in mission? I hope you'll join us for that video segment next.